Hello everyone and welcome to another Go Go Muffin video. Before we dive in here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and notification bell and drop a like on the video too if you're enjoying the content. Don't forget to join our Discord server as well if you're not already there. The link is in the description down below. We've also activated our channel membership which comes with all kinds of perks, so check that out if you're interested in joining. Speaking of channel membership, I do want to take a moment to give a special shout out to our current members. Thanks to all of you, and I hope you're enjoying the benefits. And finally, a reminder that all comments on every video will be automatically entered into our weekly giveaways, and winners will be randomly selected and announced every Monday. So good luck, and let's get started. Now, the topic of today's video will be artifacts, and if you don't already know by now, you should be aware it's a pretty important topic, because unlike other systems in the game, there's no ways for you to reset the decisions you make. Every resource you choose to spend, every choice you make of any kind is permanent. So that's why knowing what the best choices to make can save you both a lot of resources and as well optimize your progression as you advance through the game. So starting with this video, we are going to be taking a look at every single artifact in the game and making a region by region tier list. Today we'll be starting off with Darkmoon Forest. Darkmoon Forest has 10 rares, 12 epics, and 6 legendaries. And just to preface by saying this won't necessarily be a case where higher rarity automatically equals better either. Now, because of the different stat requirements, we are going to be making two separate tier lists in this video, one for DPS and one for tanks. I don't include healers because they share a lot of the DPS stats, but basically if you are a healer, all you would need to know is you'll more or less follow the DPS route, except you'll prioritize attack and healing percentage wherever you see them at a higher priority than regular DPS. So other than that, you can follow the DPS route except for those two things. But even beyond the base stats of these artifacts, we also need to factor in the artifact bonds, as there are better or worse bonds that could affect the ranking of an artifact. Now, admittedly, this doesn't really factor too much in for the Darkmoon Forest region, but for future regions it will come into play. Also, even with bonds not in consideration, this will also help you choose where to best spend your star up materials, because starring up not only takes dupes, it also takes amber, and you might not have enough amber to just level a star up every single artifact you have. So it's good to look at this and understand where it's worth investing your amber in the more important artifacts first until you can get those to 5-star or even above. Alright, so with all of that said, let's start taking a look at these artifacts, starting with the rares. So first up we have Withering Flower. Withering Flower, as you can see here, gives us a flat HP, which to be honest, as the DPS is going to be relatively low priority. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and have our first D rank here. So I'm going to go ahead and place the Withering Flower into D, because generally speaking HP as a DPS will be one of your later upgraded artifacts. You're going to focus on many other artifacts before you get to Withering Flower. Next up you have Splendid Brocade. Splendid Brocade gives you attack. Obviously this is very good for DPS, not quite as good as it is for healers, so again if you're a healer you would rank this higher than I would for a DPS. But this Splendid Brocade, as it gives attack which directly affects your DPS, it is a rare, so it's not like a super legendary or epic, but it is going to make its way all the way up to B tier for DPS, as it does contribute quite nicely to your overall DPS output. Next up we have the Guiding Lantern. Guiding Lantern, again, is an HP artifact. We've already ranked one HP artifact, and this will make it easier as we go through here because we're going to be able to quickly put duplicate effect artifacts in a similar rank as the previous one. So Guiding Lantern, like Withering Flower, is going to also end up in the D tier as HP is low priority for DPS. Next up we have Beginner's Guide to Simple Spells. Now this is yet again another attack increasing artifact. So like the Splendid Brocade, this is going to end up in the B tier. Moving on, we have Book of Kind Words, which is here. Now this gives haste. Interestingly, for DPS, I'm actually going to rank Haste higher than I would Attack. That is because it is quite good to get additional sources of Haste and Mastery, for example, Crit, Determination, etc., more so than it is for pure Attack for a DPS perspective. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to rank this Haste higher than I would rank the Attack. So believe it or not, this Book of Kind Words is going to make its way to AT here. And that is because Haste, Determination, Crit, Mastery, etc. are very, very good DPS stats. And that's why this would actually be more important to rank up than the pure Attack. Next up we have Wayland's Kindness. Wayland's Kindness gives defense. I think you can guess what's going to happen here. Yep, it's going to be a D tier, unfortunately. Defense just at the same level as HP, not particularly useful to any DPS, unfortunately. So this will be one of your last prioritized artifacts for ranking up. After Wayland's Kindness, we have Farewell Poem. Farewell Poem, once again, just like the last artifact, is going to be defense. This is going to end up solidly in the D tier for DPS. Unfortunate, but that's how it is. Next on our list is going to be Blackrock Warsong. The Blackrock Warsong, which actually gives evasion. Now, interestingly enough, if you are going to have a defensive stat as a DPS, evasion is not a bad one, because evasion literally allows you to completely dodge an attack, to completely evade an attack, and this means you'll take no damage from it. So for a DPS, whether you take a little bit of damage or a little bit more damage, it's not such a big difference, but to completely avoid the damage, that's actually pretty useful. So with that in mind, I'm going to rank Blackrock Warsong actually a little bit higher than the HP and Def, and put it into C tier, because at least evasion's a pretty good defensive stat for DPS to just completely avoid getting hit at all, because we are quite squishy anyway. It's better to avoid being hit at all than being hit and taking less damage. Then we have the Parrying Dagger, which gives block. Now, you can imagine what I'm going to say here. We have a very defensive oriented stat here, and once again I'm going to go ahead and put this into the D tier, but I am going to put it at least above HP and defense here, but still it's just not at the same level as evasion, and quite frankly, defensive stats are not going to be what you're prioritizing as the DPS out of your artifacts. And finally, from the rares here, we have Monster Ballads. Monster Ballads gives crit. Now, I've already given my spiel earlier with regards to the haste artifact, and now we have a crit artifact. So actually, this is going to be another rather good artifact. So with that in mind, this is going to go right alongside the haste artifact, Book of Kind Words, and I'm going to move this solidly up to the A tier. So that's now all of our rares ranked, which means now we're going to be moving on to our epics, of which we have 12. So there are going to be some stats that are the same, so we're going to have to keep that in mind as this is a higher rarity. So if there is a similar stat, it may or may not rank to a higher tier. So starting off, we're going to look at the Life Truffle. Now in this region, we do have quite a few of these artifacts that increase attack by a percentage in a specific region. For those who don't know, these regions here, different stages are in different regions. So for example, if you look at your trial bosses, each trial boss has its own region. And so when you fight in those regions against those trial bosses and other situations like main story, you will get this attack boost. But because of the fact that it is rather specific in its attack boost, it would not, in my opinion, rank as highly as just overall general DPS increases. It's still nice to have, I'm not saying it's useless, but generally speaking, I would not put it quite as high as I would some other offensive increasing artifacts that just have non-conditional DPS increase. So with that in mind, I think Life Truffle and most of the region-based attack increases is going to end up in the B tier for DPS, just above the flat attack here, because it is quite a nice percentage. It does go up quite nicely, but it is again dependent on you being in that region. So good, but there are better. After that, we have the Bitter Candy Box, which, like the previous one, is a region-based attack increase. This is where the Snowfield region, and once again, I'm going to slide this solidly into the B tier. It's pretty good, not bad, right at B tier. You're going to want to get it eventually, and it's going to increase your damage in certain areas, but there are better artifacts. Cornucopia, again, in all coast regions increase attack. and we're going to give it the same treatment, it's going to end up in B tier. And we're going to breeze along here. Next up, we're going to have Spring Song. Now, Spring Song, as you can see here, is going to increase HP. Now, it does increase HP quite a lot more than the rare versions do, but still it is going to be relatively low priority compared to other DPS increasing artifacts. But as this does give quite a lot more HP, we're going to give it just one bump up to C tier. Even though arguably it's still not a top priority, at least it's going to be better than these D tier artifacts, which are rare and don't contribute as many stats. So after this, we have the Potion of Oblivion, which is once again an attack increasing artifact in regions. This is going to follow the others and end up in the B tier. Then we have the Dinner Bell, which is the same once again for forest regions. And you should know the drill by now. This is going to end up also in the B tier. Next up we have the Roar Ring. The Roar Ring is every 10 levels you gain defense. This is relatively low priority when it comes to what you need to focus. However, this is going to get a... This is not going to end up in D tier for one reason and one reason only, and that is because of its bond. So this artifact is in a bond that does increase your DPS, and because of that, we're going to bump it up from the D tier up to the C tier, because it is going to give you a indirect DPS increase by getting the bond level up. That's why mine is a +9, when I would otherwise not be particularly interested in a defense increasing artifact as a DPS. Now, next up we have the Emerald Sword in the Stone, which is every 100 levels total increase in skill level, increase your attack. So this is a quite nice increase to attack, more so than the rare attack increasing ones. This is a 240 attack increase, and as a result, this is going to be bumped up one tier from the other attack artifacts because it is quite a lot more stats. So instead of being in the B tier, we're going to go ahead and place this well into the B tier. A tier, excuse me, right into the A tier. Next up, we have the Twilight Frontline Armor, which, as the look suggests, is a defense increasing artifact. Now, whether or not you get 10 defense, 100 defense, or 200 defense, it's not going to really change the interest level of that artifact. Now, this would solidly end up in the D tier, but once again, it does satisfy a bond, so it's going to end up in the C tier just because of the fact that you can get a DPS increase from getting a bond resonance. So, after the Twilight Frontline Armor, we have the Dragonator Sword, which is a large flat attack increase, much bigger than the rares once again, and we've just gone through a larger attack epic, which means we're going to follow suit and put this just underneath in the A tier as it gives slightly less attack than the other. So another very nice artifact here. Now, next up we have the Pine Nut Champagne, which is interesting because the Pine Nut Champagne is another region increasing artifact, but I will actually be ranking this one a bit higher. That is because Volcano regions is the dragon. Your daily dragon is going to be in the volcano region, and as a result this will increase your damage in the dragon, which is really, really nice. It'll also increase your healing in the dragon if you're a healer, and because we have to do the dragon every single day, and the damage that we as a party deal to the dragon determines the rewards we get. Therefore, there is a tangible and immediate, often gained benefit to being able to do more damage to the dragon. As a result, this region-based artifact is actually going to rank highly because you're doing the dragon every day. You need to do more damage to it. Therefore, it's a pretty darn good artifact. And I'm going to actually bump this above the other region-increasing artifacts well into the A tier here, because this is nice. It increases your dragon damage, which is nice to increase your overall damage output and get more rewards every single day. And our final epic is going to be the Triumphal Wreath, and once again we have an HP increasing artifact that gives 24,000 HP, and like the previous one, we're going to plop it into the C tier, not quite in D tier, but again, it's not going to be a top priority as a DPS, it's just okay. So now we've gone through all the rares and all the epics, and now we end up in our 6 legendaries. So let's start taking a look at these, starting with the Clear Vision. So here we have every 150 gear enhancements increase attack, which for me results in 415 attack. That is a lot of attack. And with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and solidly plonk this Clear Vision into the S tier, our first S tier artifact. It is a significant attack increase, and that is going to contribute nicely to our overall DPS, so this definitely gets the S tier treatment. Next up, we have the Red Horse Energy Drink, which gives a very large increase in HP, but like I said, whether you get 10,000, 20,000, or 30,000, it's not going to make that much more of a difference, so I'm going to go ahead and, like the other slightly better defensive artifacts, this is going to end up also in the C tier because of the fact that it gives a bit more stats, but again, it's also useful for a bond. Next up, we have Supreme Swordplay, and again, here we have a regional based, but it's a legendary. So in all Void regions, increase attack by 7.6%. Void regions, for those who don't know, is Waves of Horror. So this artifact directly increases your Waves of Horror damage. Pretty good, maybe not as important as the Dragon, the Volcano region increasing attack, but it's still pretty good. So it maybe won't get all the way to S tier despite being a legendary, but it's still pretty good, so I would say this is solidly at the top of A tier here because you are going to want to deal more damage in Void zones, but ultimately it's a bit less important than some of the other artifacts. Now we get to some interesting ones. Next we have the Song of Enchanted Gold. This is a sick artifact. This is a very, very, very good artifact. Increase all tactical skill damage by a large percentage and all tactical skill healing effect. This is an easy S. This is the easiest top of S, really phenomenal artifact. Anything that gives you a source of tactical skill damage, passive skill damage, core skill damage, these are very hard stats to acquire. And so that really makes this artifact the real deal. This is a very, very good artifact, and if I had enough to get this to plus 10, I would do it. That's how good it is. And the same can be said for our next artifact, the Song of the Other Shore. This is absolutely sick as well. It's also a tactical skill damage and healing effect increase, but this time it is numerical stats, which is just as important, frankly. So this is also going to end up solidly in the S tier, just below the percentage based one, to the best artifacts, the two best artifacts from this region easily. And finally, we have the Mastery Board, which is going to be a defense increase. But you can guess what's going to happen here. Yes, it's more stats, but it's more defensive stats, which doesn't really mean it deserves a higher tier. And as a result, this is going to solidly end up in C tier. And that is all of our artifacts from the Darkmoon region. So as you stare at it now, this is what you're going to be relying on as far as the best artifacts for DPS and healers. Like I said in the beginning of the video, you're going to have more or less the same, except you're going to prioritize above all the other offensive ones anything that increases attack. Otherwise, you'd follow the same general approach. So there you have it. That is the complete DPS layout, DPS tier list. And now, if you bear with me a second, I'm going to transition into the tank artifacts tier list, and we're going to do this all again a little bit quicker, but this time with tanks in mind and seeing how their tier list is compared to DPS. So let's do that switch now. Okay, and there you have it. Here we are. We're going to go through a little bit faster with the tank tier list and breeze through it. So we already know what most of these do, but because tanks have a completely different priority, we're going to go through and do this once again for our beloved tanks to give them something that they can rely on and get even tankier to clear more content. So let's start all over again. Withering Flower. This gives HP. We ranked it very lowly for DPS, but actually it's very good for tanks. So as a result, we're going to go ahead and bump this up to the B tier. Anything that increases defensive type stats for a tank is going to be obviously way more important than it was for DPS. Next we have Splendid Brocade. This is going to increase our attack. As far as increasing your defensive and survivability, this is going to be pretty low priority. So as a result, this is going to end up in the D tier. Next up, we have the Guiding Lantern. This also increases HP. We just had an HP increasing artifact. We're going to follow the same trend, and that's going to end up in the B tier. Then we have the Beginner's Guide to Simple Spells. This is an attack increasing artifact, just like the Splendid Brocade we just had. This one is going to go ahead and also end up in the D tier for tanks. Next up, we have the Book of Kind Words. This increases haste, and it is relatively more important for tanks than it would be for compared to attack, but it's still not going to be a major priority, but you're going to end up putting this in the C tier as you will try to get a bit more haste even as a tank. After this, we have Wayland's Kindness. Wayland's Kindness increases defense. Defense is a very important stat as a tank, and you have a lot of ways to increase your overall defense, and this increases your survivability a lot. So as a result, this is going to be a solid A tier for tanks because you want to get as much defense as you possibly can, and these rares are a very good source of that. Next up we have the Farewell Poem, which is also defense. We've just established that. This is going to be another solid A tier. Then after that we have the Blackrock Warsong, which is going to be evasion. It is another good defensive stat, but it is somewhat less of a priority than the other defensives like defense and HP. You're still going to want to get some evasion until cap, but it's going to be less important than defense and HP overall, so that's going to end up in the C tier above haste. Then we have the Parrying Dagger. Parrying Dagger gives block, which is another phenomenal defensive stat as you want to chase as a tank. You're going to want to get 55% block, so you really can't get enough block from your various sources. So as a result, this is going to join the defense artifacts up at A tier, another phenomenal artifact for tanks. And finally, on the rares, we have the Monster Ballads, which is going to increase your crit. Once again, this is going to end up in the C tier just above the attack increasing at D because you're not going to really need too much more DPS as a tank, but it's nice to have that, I guess, above the attack ones. So that's all the rares, and next up we're going to end up at the epics. So we know already we have a lot of these regional based attack increases, and ultimately for a tank these are going to be pretty low priority, about as low as it gets. So we're going to go ahead and rather than put these in the same place we did for DPS, these are all going to end up in the D tier. Life Shuffle, D tier. Bitter Candy Box, Snowfield Attack, D tier. Next up we have Cornucopia, Coast Regions Attack, D tier. This is really, it doesn't have any impact on your defensive capabilities, and this, you know, if you're a DPS sword bearer, you're going to be following the DPS tier list anyway. This is all about tanking. Then we have the Spring Song. Spring Song is going to increase your HP, and this increases your HP by quite a lot more, and because of the fact that it's higher stats, plus there's a nice bond attached to it as well, this is going to get +1 rank up into the A tier, above the other HP ones. Next up we have the Potion of Oblivion. Potion of Oblivion, like the others, are increasing regional attacks. This is going to be D tier. Then we have the Dinner Bell, Forest Region attack increase, D tier. Next we have the Roar Ring. Really nice artifact here. This is going to increase your defense by quite a lot. And because of how important defense is and the fact that this is in fact going to give us a bond as well, believe it or not, this is going to end up in the S tier because it is a very good artifact. It is an epic. It costs, you'll be able to get more dupes of it and get this up to a high star and get plenty of defense from this. So very nice artifact for tanks, and the first epic that we're going to see in the S tier actually. Next we have the Emerald Sword and the Stone. This does increase flat attack. It's not that important for tanks, and ultimately this is going to be bumped up just to the C tier because it's a bit more stats than the others, and it does have a bond as well, which allows you to actually get a little bit of defensive stats in addition. Then we have the Twilight Frontline Armor, which is another very nice defense increase. And like the other big defense increasing epic, we're going to go ahead and place it in the S tier because this does give a lot of defense, plus it has a bond as well, so it's a very nice artifact for tanks. Then we have the Dragonator Sword. The Dragonator Sword is a large flat attack increase, relatively low priority for tanks. We're going to go ahead and put that in the C tier because it does also have a bond. Pine Nut Champagne, this is the dragon increasing damage artifact and the attack increase, in the volcano regions where the dragon is. And again, this is going to be pretty low priority for tank, but slightly higher than the other regions. This is also going to be in the C tier. Then final in the epics is going to be Triumphal Reach, which as you can see is a quite large HP increase. So this is also going to be a very nice artifact ending up in the A tier because it's slightly less important than defense, but still quite nice. And that's all of our rares and epics, and now we have our 6 legendaries to go through. So first off, we have clear vision, which is a very large increase to attack, but again, this is not particularly important for tanks, so this is going to follow suit and end up in the C tier. Then we have the Red Horse Energy Drink, which is a very, very large increase to HP, 40,000 HP from this, and as a result, this is going to be a very nice artifact. It's going to end up in the S tier. That is a lot of HP to get from one artifact. Then we have the Supreme Swordplay, which increases your damage in the Void regions. Again, you're a tank, you don't really care too much about damage, but we are going to go ahead and put this in the C tier because it is slightly more important than the other ones. Then we have Song from the Other Shore, which increases your tactical skill damage and healing effect. You don't really have any heals on your tactical skills, so this doesn't really matter to tanks, and your damage again is somewhat irrelevant, but we're going to go ahead and put both this one and the next one, which, as you know, does the percentage based. Both of these do, one is flat, one is percentage based. These are both again in the C tier. And finally, the Mastery Board, which is a huge defense increase, and this, which is an easy one for us, is going to go into the absolute top of S tier. So there you have it. This is the perfect layout for tanks. These are all your DARKMOON artifacts ranked for the best that you should be prioritizing that's going to increase your tanking capabilities. So there you have it. We've had both the DPS and the tanking tier list. This is the tanking tier list, and this is the DPS tier list. We're going to look at them one more time. This is DPS, and this is tank. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. These are both of the tier lists that are going to be for the first region of artifacts, the Darkmoon Forest. And I'll be following up this video with more tier lists for the other regions that I've already unlocked for artifacts, so that you can understand how to prioritize your very limited resources for the artifact system to make sure you aren't wasting them. Because like we said, this is a one and done system. You put resources in, you can't get them back out. Your decisions are permanent. So with that in mind, I hope you found this video helpful and it helps you know how to prioritize your artifacts. So with that said, thanks for watching everyone. Take care, and I will see you in the next video. Bye now.